My name is John Dunn. I used to be a commanding officer in the United States Army. I don't say that with pride anymore. Not the way I used to. Back then, it meant something. Rank, structure, purpose. You wake up knowing exactly what your job is, exactly what's expected of you, and exactly what happens if you fail. There's comfort in that, even if people on the outside don't understand it. Out there in the field, things are simple. Not easy, but simple. You follow orders, you keep your men alive, or you don't. I spent most of my career in places people don't talk about unless they have to. Dry regions, tight urban environments, operations that never made it into the news. Long deployments, short rotations, and just enough downtime in between to forget what normal life was supposed to feel like. You learn quickly what matters. Water, ammo, position, timing. Everything else becomes background noise. I led men into situations where we all knew there was a good chance not everyone would come back. That kind of knowledge changes you, not in some dramatic, cinematic way. It's quieter than that. You stop thinking long-term. You stop imagining the future. You focus on the next hour, the next decision, the next step. Because that's the only thing you can control. People assume the hardest part is the combat. It's not. It's what comes after. The silence, the empty seats, the names you don't say out loud anymore. I lost good men, better men than me. Men who followed orders without hesitation because they trusted me to bring them back. Not all of them did. You carry that. Doesn't matter how many years pass. Doesn't matter how many times you tell yourself there was nothing you could have done differently. It stays. After a while, you stop trying to get rid of it. You just learn to move with it. That's what the Army gave me. Discipline, control, the ability to function when everything around me falls apart, and fear. Not the kind people think. I was never afraid of gunfire, or explosions, or being shot at. That kind of fear burns fast. It's sharp, immediate, and then it's gone. No, the fear I carried with me was something else. Height. I used to have a serious problem with it. Not just discomfort, not just nerves. Real, physical fear. The kind that locks your muscles and makes your body refuse to move, even when your brain is screaming at you to do it. I hid it well at first. You have to. There's no room for hesitation in that line of work. But eventually, you run out of ways to avoid it. My unit started running more air insertion operations. Helicopters, fast ropes, elevated drops. There's no "I'll sit this one out" in that situation. You either step up or you're done. The first time I had to rappel out of a helicopter, I remember looking down and thinking, this is where it ends. Not because of enemy fire. Not because of a mission gone wrong. Because I couldn't move. The ground looked too far away. The distance didn't make sense. For a second, I froze. And in that second, I realized something. If I didn't move, someone behind me would. And hesitation gets people killed. So I went. I didn't conquer the fear that day. Not even close. But I moved through it. And then I did it again. And again. And again, until one day. It was just another step in the process. Not comfortable, not easy, but controlled. That's how it works. You don't eliminate fear. You learn how to operate with it, how to push through it, how to ignore it when it matters. That's the difference between people who survive and people who don't. By the time I left the army, I wasn't the same person who had joined. No one ever is. But I was something else. Adapted. I knew how to read situations fast, how to make decisions under pressure, how to prioritize survival over everything else. I knew how people react when things go wrong. Panic, denial, desperation. And I knew what happens when systems fail. Everything collapses faster than anyone expects, faster than they're ready for. Back then, those were just lessons, experiences, things I thought I had left behind. I figured whatever came next in my life would be quieter, slower, normal. I didn't expect to ever need those skills again. I was wrong. Because when it finally started, when everything people depended on began to break, when order turned into chaos, and survival became the only thing that mattered again, I realized something. All of it. The training, the fear, the decisions, the losses, had only been preparing me for one thing. And I was about to go through it all over again. Then everything fell apart. The first signs didn't come all at once. They never do. At the beginning, it was just noise. Reports on the radio, fragments of information, words like incident, containment, quarantine. Nothing concrete, nothing that felt immediate. People kept going to work. Stores stayed open. Traffic moved like it always did. It felt distant, like something happening somewhere else, to someone else. That illusion didn't last long. Within days, the tone changed. The reports got sharper, more urgent. They stopped using vague language, started saying things directly. Infected, spread, uncontrolled. That's when people began to react. And once that happens, there's no stopping it. Panic spreads faster than anything. I saw it firsthand at the airport. It wasn't a major one. Just a small regional airfield on the edge of the city, mostly used for short domestic flights and private traffic. Normally quiet, manageable. That day, it was a choke point. The highway leading to it was already jammed when I got there. Cars packed bumper to bumper, horns blaring, people getting out of their vehicles, shouting at each other like that was going to make the line move. I stayed in my car for maybe 30 seconds before I realized it was pointless. Engines were off. Drivers were abandoning vehicles. Some people were trying to cut across lanes. Others were dragging luggage down the shoulder, heading toward the terminal on foot. They thought they could still leave. I grabbed my bag from the passenger seat and stepped out. The air felt different. Heavy, not physically, mentally, like something had already shifted, and everyone could feel it without fully understanding why. I moved with the flow of people toward the terminal. The closer I got, the louder it became. Voices layered over each other, arguments, crying, shouting. The entrance was packed. Security had completely broken down. No lines, no structure, just bodies pushing forward. Inside was worse. Every inch of space was filled. People pressed shoulder to shoulder, trying to get to the counters, to the gates, to anyone who could give them an answer. There were none. Screens were still on, showing delayed flights, cancellations, routes that were no longer active. No one updated them. No one was in control. I pushed my way through carefully, keeping my movements controlled. No sudden motions, No wasted energy. That's the first rule in a crowd like that. You don't panic, because the second you do, you become part of the problem. I kept scanning. Faces, hands, movement patterns, looking for the first real sign that things had crossed the line. It didn't take long. Near one of the boarding gates, I saw a man collapse. At first, no one reacted. People assumed he fainted, exhaustion, stress. Then he started convulsing, hard, violently. That got attention. A few people stepped back. Others leaned in, trying to help. That's always how it starts. Someone shouted for medical assistance. There wasn't any. The man stopped moving. For a second, everything froze around him. Then, he moved again. But not the same way. He didn't get up slowly. Didn't regain consciousness like someone waking up. He snapped upright, too fast. His movements were wrong, uncoordinated, aggressive. The people closest to him didn't react fast enough. He grabbed the first one. No hesitation, no warning, just violence. Screaming erupted instantly. The crowd surged backward. People pushing, falling, climbing over each other just to get away. I stepped aside, creating distance. Watching, confirming. Because once you see it once, you know. It wasn't an isolated case. Across the terminal, more incidents started breaking out. Same pattern. Collapse, convulsions. Then, attack. Security tried to intervene. Bad move. They weren't prepared. Didn't understand what they were dealing with. They treated it like a standard disturbance. They got too close. Within minutes, they were part of it. The noise inside the building became unbearable. Screaming, running, things breaking, gunshots. That changed everything. The moment shots are fired in a crowd like that, control is gone. People stopped thinking, they ran. In every direction. No coordination, no exits, just movement. I backed away from the main terminal, moving toward the outer edge of the airfield. Outside wasn't any better. The tarmac was chaos. People were trying to get onto planes that weren't even boarding. Ground crew abandoning equipment, vehicles left running, doors open. And beyond all of that, the infected were spreading. Fast. Too fast. Every person that got taken became another problem, another threat, another source. I stood there for a moment, taking it all in. Not emotionally, strategically. That's the difference. You don't focus on what it is. You focus on what it means. And what it meant was simple. This wasn't contained. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't something that would stabilize. This was collapse. Total, uncontrolled. And the airport was the worst place to be. Too many people, too little space. Too much panic, no exit. I turned away from the chaos. Not because I didn't care, because I understood something they didn't. Staying meant dying. Waiting meant dying. Following the crowd meant dying. I looked back once, at the terminal, at the runway, at the mass of people still trying to push forward, still believing they had a way out. They didn't. And that was the moment it became clear. No one was getting out of here. Not like this. I didn't run with them. That's the first thing I want to make clear. Because instinct tells you to. When people start screaming, you move. When a crowd surges, you follow. When chaos hits, your body reacts before your mind can catch up. But I'd seen this before. Not exactly like this. Not with infected, not with whatever this had become. But the pattern was the same. Too many people, too little control, and once panic takes over, the crowd becomes the threat. I stepped away from it. Not fast, not suddenly, just enough to separate myself from the mass. That's all it takes, a few steps in the right direction. I moved along the outer edge of the airfield, keeping distance between myself and the main flow of people. Most of them didn't even notice. They were too focused on getting out, on reaching the planes, on finding someone to tell them what to do. That's another thing people don't understand. When systems collapse, most people don't switch to survival mode. They look for authority. They wait for instructions. And when those instructions don't come, they break. I kept walking, away from the terminal, away from the noise. And that's when I saw it. The industrial complex. It sat just beyond the edge of the airfield. A cluster of low buildings, storage units, metal structures, and one tall vertical element rising above everything else. A chimney, old, steel, functional once maybe, now just part of the skyline. Most people ignored it. They didn't even look in that direction, because it wasn't an exit. It didn't lead anywhere. But that's exactly why I paid attention. Exits were death traps. Everyone was trying to get to the same place, same road, same gates, same planes, which meant they were all gathering in one spot, concentrated, predictable. And that's exactly what the infected needed. I stopped for a second, just long enough to think. Evaluate? There's a moment in situations like that, where everything slows down, not physically, mentally. You shut out the noise, the panic, the chaos, and you look for the one option that gives you control. Not escape, control. Running wasn't control, waiting wasn't control. Fighting through that many people wasn't control, but distance, elevation, isolation. That was something else. That was survival. I adjusted my grip on my bag, checked the contents quickly. Water, food, basic tools, flashlight, extra layers. Enough to last for a while, if I used it right. That was all I needed. I turned away from the airfield completely, didn't look back this time, and headed toward the industrial complex. The fence surrounding it wasn't meant to keep people out. Not really. Chain link, some sections bent, others partially broken. I found a weak spot near one of the corners, climbed through, dropped onto the other side. Silence, not complete. But compared to the airport, it felt like stepping into a different world. No crowds, no screaming, just wind, metal, distance. I moved deeper into the complex, keeping low, checking angles, corners, entry points. The buildings were mostly locked. Heavy doors, no easy access. But that wasn't what I was looking for. Ground level was a risk. Too many blind spots, too many entry points. If something got inside, you'd never see it coming. I needed height. A single access point, a defensible position, somewhere I could see everything. Before it reached me, I kept moving, scanning. Then I saw it again. The chimney, closer now, taller than I had first thought, and attached to it, a ladder, steel, vertical, running all the way up, exposed. No cover, no safety net, just a straight climb into open air. I stopped in front of it, looked up. The top disappeared into the sky. Wind moved around it, low and constant. Under normal circumstances, I might have hesitated. Old instincts, old fear, height. But this wasn't normal. And fear was something I had already learned to manage. I looked back once, toward the airport. Smoke rising, movement still chaotic, people still running, still believing. Then I looked up again, at the ladder, at the one place no one else had thought to go. And in that moment, the decision was already made. Because if there was one thing I understood better than anything else, it was this: the higher you are, the longer you live. I stepped forward and placed my hand on the steel. Cold, solid, real. Then I started climbing. The climb was longer than it looked. It always is. From the ground, things seem manageable. Distances shrink. Heights feel abstract. Your brain simplifies it into something you think you can handle. Then you start moving, and reality sets in. The metal was cold under my hands. Dry, but worn. The kind of surface that had been exposed to years of weather, heat, and neglect. Every rung felt slightly different, some solid, some with a faint give that made you test your weight before committing. I didn't rush. That's the first mistake people make. Speed doesn't get you up faster. It just gets you tired. And fatigue gets you killed. So I moved steady. One hand, one foot, shift weight, repeat. The ground pulled away quicker than I expected. Within the first few meters, the noise from the airport started to fade. Not completely, but it dulled, like someone had lowered the volume on the world below. By the time I was halfway up, the sounds had changed. Less screaming, more distance, wind. It hit stronger the higher I climbed. Not enough to throw me off, but enough to remind me that I wasn't on stable ground anymore. I didn't look down, not at first. Old habit. You don't give your brain a reason to hesitate. You keep your focus forward, up. But eventually, you feel it. The height, the space beneath you. And you know. You just know that if something goes wrong up here, there's no recovery, no second chance. I paused briefly, adjusted my grip, and kept moving. By the time I reached the top, my arms were burning slightly. Not exhaustion, just strain. Controlled. I swung myself over the final edge and pulled onto the platform. Flat surface. Concrete. Cold. I stayed low for a second. Let my body settle. Let my breathing even out. Then I stood up and looked. The view was exactly what I needed. Clear lines of sight in every direction. The industrial complex spread out below me, rooftops, storage units, narrow alleys between structures. Beyond that, the airport. And further still, the city. Smoke rising in multiple places, thin at first, then thicker. Movement everywhere. But from up here, it made sense. Patterns. That's what you look for. Not individual people, not isolated events. Movement patterns, flow, behavior. The infected stood out immediately, not because of how they looked, because of how they moved. Fast when they needed to be. Direct, aggressive, no hesitation. They didn't wander. They targeted. I watched one group break into the open space near the runway. A cluster of people tried to scatter. Didn't work. Too slow, too disorganized. One got grabbed. The rest followed seconds later. It happened fast, too fast. And then, those same people were no longer people. They moved again, different, part of the same pattern. I exhaled slowly. That confirmed it. This wasn't something you could outrun, not in the long term. I turned away from the view for a moment and set my bag down. Time to make this place usable. I moved methodically. That's the key. You don't panic build. You don't rush. You establish. I checked the surface first. No loose debris, no unstable sections. Then I picked a position near the base of the chimney. It provided partial cover from the wind, also reduced visibility from below. Good. I unpacked what I needed. Water bottles, food supplies, a thermal blanket, flashlight. Basic tools. Everything had a place. Everything had a purpose. I kept the essentials within arm's reach. The rest organized behind me. You don't scatter your gear. You don't create confusion, because when things go wrong, you don't have time to search. Once I was done, I sat down, back against the structure, and took out the binoculars. Slow scan, left to right. Then again, slower. The airport was deteriorating faster than I expected. Movement had become chaotic. Groups breaking apart, others forming. Some people were still trying to get into aircraft. Others were abandoning everything. And the infected were multiplying. Every engagement led to more. Every mistake fed the problem. I tracked one individual running across an open section. He made it maybe 10 meters before something hit him from the side. Took him down, gone in seconds. I lowered the binoculars. No emotion. Not anymore. You don't process it like that. You can't, because if you do, you hesitate, and hesitation kills. I leaned back slightly, letting the cold concrete settle beneath me. The wind moved steadily across the rooftop. The noise from below felt distant now, contained, like I was watching it instead of being part of it. And for the first time since it all started, I had something most people down there didn't. Distance, time, control. I wasn't safe. Not permanently. But for now, I was above it, out of reach. And in this kind of situation, that's as close to safety as you get. I don't know how long I'd been up there. Time changes when you're isolated. Minutes stretch, hours compress. You stop measuring it the way you used to. I had settled into a rhythm. Scan, wait, observe, repeat. The wind stayed constant. The noise below stayed distant. And for a while, it worked. I had control. At least I thought I did. That's the problem with feeling safe. It makes you forget one thing. You're not the only one trying to survive. I had just lowered the binoculars when I felt it. Not a sound, not movement. A shift. The kind you only notice when it's already too late. My body reacted before my mind caught up. I turned, fast. And there he was, standing behind me, close enough that if I hadn't turned when I did, he would have been right on top of me. My hand moved instantly, not for a weapon. I didn't have one ready. But into position, defensive, ready. His posture mirrored mine, tense, balanced. We stood there, facing each other, both calculating, both deciding. He looked like he had been on the move for a while. Clothes worn, dirt across his hands, breathing controlled, but not calm, same as me. "Easy," he said. His voice was low, measured, not aggressive, but not relaxed either. "You climbed up here?" I asked. "Same as you." His eyes flicked briefly toward the ladder, then back to me. Neither of us moved, because we both knew. The first mistake ends it. Not just with the infected, with people too, especially now. I had already seen what desperation does. People killing each other for supplies, for space, for nothing. Trust wasn't something you gave away. "You alone?" I asked. "Yes." No hesitation. Could have been a lie. Probably wasn't. "You?" "Same." Another pause. Longer this time. The wind moved between us. Neither of us broke eye contact. I shifted slightly. Testing. His reaction was immediate, not aggressive, but ready. That told me enough. He knew what he was doing, not trained military, but experienced. Or at least, adapted quickly. "Name?" I asked. "Brad." Short, direct. He didn't ask mine right away. That was interesting. Like he didn't need it, or didn't trust it. "John," I said anyway. He nodded once, acknowledged it, didn't question it. Another silence. The kind where both people are waiting for the other to make the wrong move. Because that's what this was now. A decision point. Two survivors, one position, limited resources, and one question. Do you fight? Or do you cooperate? My grip tightened slightly. Not visible, but enough that I could act if needed. He noticed. Of course he did. "I'm not here to take your stuff," he said. That wasn't reassurance. That was positioning. "I didn't say you were," I replied. Didn't have to. "Fair." He shifted his weight slightly. Not closer, not further. Neutral. "I was on the other side of the complex," he said. Didn't hold. "Too exposed," I said. He nodded. "You saw the ladder?" "Yes." "Same idea." "Yeah." That was it. No need to explain further. We had both come to the same conclusion, independently. That mattered. Because it meant something. Same thought process. Same priorities. Survival first. Another gust of wind passed over the rooftop. I glanced past him briefly, checked the ladder. Clear, then back to him. Still there. Still watching. Still waiting. "You planning on pushing me off?" I asked. Not a joke. A real question. He didn't smile. No. Simple. Direct. I believed him. Not completely, but enough. "Good," I said. "Because if you were, you would have tried already." That earned a slight shift in his expression. Not amusement, recognition. "Same goes for you," he replied. I nodded. Fair again. We stood there a few seconds longer. Then, almost at the same time, we both relaxed. Not fully, but enough to lower the immediate tension. Not enemies. Not yet. I stepped back first, just enough to break the standoff. If you're staying, I said, you follow structure. He didn't react negatively. Meaning? Meaning we don't get in each other's way. We don't waste resources. And we don't do anything that gets both of us killed. He listened, considered it, then nodded. Works for me. I watched him for another second, then turned slightly, gave him space. That was the decision. Not spoken out loud, but understood. We weren't alone anymore. And in a situation like this, that could either double your chances of survival or cut them in half. The difference would depend on one thing: whether we trusted each other enough not to make the first mistake. For now, we had chosen to try. Time stopped meaning what it used to, not in a dramatic way, just slowly. Days blurred together. You stop counting dates, stop thinking in weeks. Everything becomes measured in cycles. Light, dark, cold, movement, survival. Brad and I didn't talk much at first. We didn't need to. There's a kind of understanding that forms between people in situations like that. You don't waste words. You don't force conversation. You observe. You adapt. You prove yourself through actions. The first few days were about testing each other, not directly. Subtle things, how we moved, how we handled the ladder, how we reacted to noise, whether we watched each other's blind spots or ignored them. Brad paid attention. That was the first thing I noticed. He didn't leave openings, didn't rush, didn't panic, and more importantly, he didn't do anything stupid. That alone put him ahead of most people. We started moving off the rooftop after the third day. Carefully, always together, never longer than necessary. The complex had enough to work with if you knew where to look. Storage units, old maintenance rooms, supply containers that hadn't been cleared out yet. We found canned food first, water supplies, basic tools. Not much, but enough. The key wasn't what you found, it was how often you had to risk finding more. We kept our movements tight. Down the ladder, sweep the area, check corners, listen, always listen. The infected didn't hide. That was the one advantage. They weren't quiet. Not really. Their movement gave them away. Their sounds carried. You just had to recognize it early enough. The first time we engaged one up close, it was quick, too quick. Brad spotted it before I did. Left, he said low. I turned. It came out from behind a container, fast, direct. No hesitation. I stepped in. Controlled. Didn't give it space, didn't let it build momentum. We took it down together. Clean. Efficient. No wasted movement. After that, there was no question. We worked. Not perfectly, but effectively. Days turned into weeks, and the world below us changed. At first, the airport had been chaos. Now, it was something else. Organized. Not in a good way. Through the binoculars, we started noticing patterns. Groups, armed, structured, not military. Worse, looters. They had taken control of the airfield, set up positions, controlled access points, and anyone who came near didn't get a second chance. We watched it happen more than once. People still came, desperate, looking for supplies, looking for a way out. They didn't understand. The system had changed. This wasn't about escape anymore. It was about control. The looters didn't negotiate. They didn't warn. They just shot. Quick, efficient, took what they needed, left the rest. Sometimes, they didn't even wait for the infected. They created the problem themselves. The infected would move in after, clean up what was left, feed the cycle. Brad lowered the binoculars one evening and shook his head slightly. "People are worse than them," he said. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. He wasn't wrong. The infected were predictable. They followed instinct. The living made choices. And those choices got worse the longer things went on. The city beyond the airport didn't fare any better. Smoke increased. Movement decreased. Less activity. Less life. What remained was scattered. Broken. The structure was gone. No emergency response. No coordination. No recovery. Just isolated pockets of survival. And everything in between. Dead. Up on the rooftop. Things were different. Hard. But stable. We established routines, watch rotations, supply checks, movement schedules. No unnecessary risks, no wasted energy. Brad adapted fast, faster than I expected. He learned how to move quietly, how to read space, how to anticipate. Not trained, but capable. That was enough. We didn't talk about before. Didn't matter. The past doesn't help you up here. Only the next decision does. Weeks passed. The noise below faded further. The chaos didn't disappear. It just became distant, contained, like a storm you could see, but not feel. For now. One evening, I sat back against the base of the chimney, scanning the horizon. Brad sat a few feet away, checking supplies. No tension, no uncertainty, just routine. It wasn't comfortable, but it worked. And in a world that had completely fallen apart. That was more than most people had. I looked out over the airport one more time, then lowered the binoculars. For the first time since it all started, I knew something for certain. We weren't just surviving anymore. We had become something else. A system, a unit. And as long as we stayed that way, we had a chance. You don't notice the shift at first. Not immediately. It starts subtle. The air gets sharper. The wind cuts deeper. Breath lingers a little longer in front of your face. Then one morning, you wake up, and everything is different. The first snow came overnight. Not heavy. Not enough to cover everything completely, but enough. Enough to change the world. The rooftops were dusted white, the metal surfaces coated in thin frost. The air felt colder than anything we had dealt with so far. Not uncomfortable, dangerous. Cold doesn't just slow you down. It wears you down, slowly, constantly. Every movement takes more effort. Every decision takes more energy. And energy becomes your most valuable resource. Brad noticed it the same way I did. Didn't say anything at first, just adjusted. Extra layers? Less unnecessary movement. More time spent conserving heat. We reinforced our position on the rooftop. Used what we had. Old insulation from the lower levels. Scraps of material. Anything that could block wind. It wasn't much. But it made a difference. Enough to stay functional. That's all you aim for. Not comfort. Function. Our supply runs changed immediately. Shorter, more focused. No wasted routes, no exploring. We moved with purpose, in and out, every time. The snow made tracking easier. Footprints stood out. Not just ours, everything's. The infected left trails. Clusters formed where they gathered. Movement patterns became clearer. But that came with a cost. There were more of them. Not faster. If anything, they slowed slightly in the cold. Movements more rigid, less fluid. But numbers increased every day. More movement across the complex, more presence near the airport, and fewer signs of anyone else alive. The world was thinning. We adapted. Changed routes, avoided open spaces. Engagements became less frequent, but more dangerous. Because now, mistakes cost more. Cold makes you slower. Slower gets you caught. Caught gets you killed. One run nearly ended that way. We were moving along the side of one of the storage buildings. Routine, clear path. Or so we thought. Brad stopped first. Hand up. Signal. I froze instantly. Listened. Nothing. Then, movement. Behind us. Two of them, closer than expected. We adjusted, turned, controlled engagement. But the ground, the snow, shifted underfoot, less stable, less predictable. One misstep, just one. And it almost got through, closer than anything before. We handled it, barely. But afterward, we both knew. This wasn't the same anymore. Conditions had changed, and that meant we had to change too. Back on the rooftop, the wind had picked up. Colder now, less forgiving. I sat near the edge, watching the horizon. Everything looked different under snow, cleaner, quieter. But that was a lie. Nothing was cleaner. Nothing was quieter. It was just covered. Brad sat nearby, checking our remaining supplies. We had enough. For now. If we were careful. If we didn't make mistakes. If we stayed disciplined. That word mattered more than anything else now. Discipline. Not skill. Not strength. Discipline keeps you alive when everything else starts to fail. I exhaled slowly, watching the air disappear into the cold. We tighten everything, I said. Brad looked up, nodded, no argument, no hesitation. He understood. We both did. The margin for error was gone. There was no room left for adaptation after the fact. Everything had to be right. Before it happened. Because winter doesn't forgive mistakes. And neither does this world. I looked out across the frozen complex one more time. Movement in the distance. Shadows shifting between structures. More of them. Always more. Then I lowered the binoculars and leaned back against the cold surface behind me. We weren't losing. Not yet. But the rules had changed. And from this point on, survival wasn't about holding on. It was about tightening control, about doing everything right every time. Because one mistake now would be the last one. And we both knew it. From here on out, we had to be better, more precise, more disciplined, or we wouldn't make it through the winter. The radio wasn't supposed to work, not anymore. We had found it weeks earlier in one of the maintenance rooms below. Old, dusty, barely holding together. The kind of thing you'd normally ignore because it wasn't worth the wait. But I kept it. Habit. You don't throw away communication. Not in situations like this. For a long time, it gave us nothing. Static, broken signals, fragments of voices that didn't mean anything. Just noise. Then one night, it changed. I was on watch. Wind cutting across the rooftop, temperature low enough that every breath burned slightly on the way in. The world below was quiet in that unnatural way we had gotten used to. Brad was resting. I had the binoculars in one hand, the radio sitting next to me, and then, through the static, a voice, faint, unstable, but real. I froze, adjusted the dial slowly. The signal sharpened for a second, then broke, then came back. If you can hear this. I leaned in closer. Safe zone, northern routes, multiple survivors confirmed. The words came in fragments. Military presence, limited access. Then static again. Gone. Just like that. I sat there for a moment, listening, waiting. Nothing. The signal didn't return, but it didn't need to. I had heard enough. Brad stirred behind me. "You hear that?" he asked, voice still rough from sleep. "Yeah," I said. He sat up slowly. "What was it?" "Possible safe zone," I replied. "North." Silence settled between us. Not the usual kind. This was different. Heavy. Because for the first time in weeks, there was something new. Something outside this rooftop. Something that wasn't just survival. Hope. Brad rubbed his face, thinking. "You believe it?" he asked. I didn't answer immediately, because belief didn't matter, only probability. "Doesn't matter," I said eventually. "What matters is what it costs to find out." He nodded slowly. We both knew what that meant. Leaving this position meant risk, not small risk, everything. Out there, we had no control, no elevation, no visibility, no structure, just movement, unknowns, and distance. "How far?" he asked. Signal said north. No specifics. So we'd be guessing. "Yes." Another silence. The wind filled the space between us. I looked out across the frozen complex. Everything still, everything cold, everything predictable. That was the key. Predictable. Brad followed my gaze. "You thinking about it?" he asked. "Yes." Same. Neither of us said anything else for a while, because the answer wasn't simple. Stay. And we had what we needed. Food, water, position, control, leave. And maybe there was something better. Or maybe nothing at all. A trap, a lie. or just another place like this, but without the advantage. I picked up the radio again, turned the dial slowly. Static, nothing else. No confirmation, no direction, just one broken message. That's not enough. Not to abandon a secure position, not to gamble everything. I set the radio down. "Not yet," I said. Brad looked at me, then nodded. "Yeah," he said, "not yet." That was the decision. Not permanent, but real. We stayed. Because here, we understood the rules. Out there, we didn't. And in this world, that difference meant everything. The days continued. Cold, quiet. The snow settled deeper. The wind grew sharper. The infected still moved below. Slower, but always there. We watched. Like we always had. Like we always would. Two figures on a rooftop. Above a dead world. I sat back against the chimney, binoculars resting in my hands. Brad sat a few feet away. No words, none needed. We looked out across the horizon, at the airport, at the frozen structures, at the empty roads stretching into nothing. Everything still, everything silent, everything gone. For now, we had survived. We had found a place where the world couldn't reach us easily, where the rules made sense, where mistakes were still avoidable, if you were careful, if you were disciplined. But that didn't mean it would last. Nothing lasts. Not in a world like this. I lifted the binoculars one last time, scanned the distance. Movement, far off, always something, always a reminder. I lowered them again and leaned back, letting the cold settle around me. We had made it this far. That counted for something. But survival isn't a victory. It's a delay. And sooner or later, something changes. Something breaks. Something forces you to move. I looked out over the frozen world again. Still, silent, dead. And for the first time since all of this began, I allowed myself one thought. Not fear, not doubt, just reality. We survived, but I don't know for how long.